Mark, let's bring you in because, of course, as far as these organisations are concerned, everything in the future will be better. We will live in utopia. What have you got?
Well, last Friday, Brian, you might recall, was the first day of the Summit of the Future of the United Nations. And this summit actually was broken into two segments. The 20th and 21st is Action Days, which is largely youth-oriented. And then the next 2 days was the summit itself. Let's go back to that first slide, please. And this Summit of the Future Action Days began with this crucial information. First, by putting in place new international norms and mechanisms to both manage and harness the potential of emerging areas of innovation. Second, by doubling down on our efforts to achieve the world envisaged by the UN Charter, the Sustainable Development Goals, and our commitments to address climate change, with a particular focus on making sure we have the necessary resources and fit-for-purpose institutions to deliver. Finally, the goal and the objective of all this will challenge us to take a fresh look at the UN itself, its institutions, which includes the WHO, and ways of working to be more networked, inclusive, and effective by engaging all stakeholders. So I'm focusing today just on those first 2 days, the action days. This illustration to the left here was curious, and it shows that global cities, associated artwork has in its center local and regional government and the key role of cities and mayors. So the Global Cities Movement is tying into this, something I'll be covering October 10th for an AV program, and I covered it a couple years ago as well. So global cities do plug into this. Over 7,000 people came to UN headquarters for the 2 days of action days. Again, a lot of youth involved to get them marinated in UN principles. And we'll move on from there. And I believe we have a video coming up, and it kind of gives an overview and a feel for what they're going after here.
I see world leaders, I see mayors and legislators, civil society, the private sector, academics, artists, activists, and young people. We will not solve today's global problems without contributions from all of society.
Speaking to the youth is like speaking to the future. You are the torch bearers.
The Summit of the Future is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reshape multilateral system and to put young people at the center.
Give them the space and the freedom to participate meaningfully in finding the solutions.
We need to decentralize and localize financing so that communities can step up and take action for themselves.
If you are not including persons with disabilities, you are missing 1.3 billion people around the world.
It's going to take transformative change, systemic change, underpinned by feminist principles to make sure that young people, especially young women and girls, are at the center of multilateralism.
Las mujeres con discapacidad seamos vistas.
The smart bet is always on the youth.
Not just youth consultations or youth-informed decisions, but young people at the table.
An agreement is nothing without action.
To recommit to multilateralism through the United Nations to resolve disputes peacefully.
Action must be taken now to safeguard the SDGs and sustainable futures for all.
None of this is possible without innovative, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder partnerships.
I believe that it is possible for us to have a win-win.
What I can promise you is that we will carry your insights and ideas forward into the Summit of the Future.
Friends, this is what effective, inclusive, networked multilateralism must look like.
Let's shape our future together.
As you can see, Brian, the whole thing is really heavy with the language of globalese, lots of terminology that can mean different things to different people. The use of the word multilateralism, I'll mention briefly, is rather curious. In geopolitics, that basically means like if you have unilateralism, the United States will work with another country directly. But multilateralism involves coalitions of countries working together or sometimes in conflict. And so in this context, it's not altogether clear what they mean by multilateralism, but that's just one term among many that is used in the language of globalese. Anyway, moving forward, more on the action days, it gets into bringing together representatives from member states, civil society, private sector, academia, local and regional authorities, youth, and many more. The action days provide an opportunity for broad engagement. These stakeholders have all played a key role in shaping the Pact for the Future, which is very important, and its 2 annexes, and will be critical to implementation. And we'll describe that a little more, what those annexes are as we go along. These are some of the elements out of the report that's posted and available about the action days. And I won't read all this content, of course, but there's lots of email addresses in here, and they put this out as public information. So UK column viewers are free to write to these people and ask questions, just as we may as reporters. A digital future for all was part of the first 2 days of the overall 4-day event. And so that's interesting, a digital future for all. And it's almost like they're pushing us into digitization in sort of an arbitrary fashion, as if we all absolutely need it. Another one, how can parliaments help close the Sustainable Development Goals financing gap? And it mentions in here, the Agenda 2030 cannot be achieved unless financing of sustainable development is massively scaled up. So that means taxpayers of individual nations must massively scale up the taxes to try and get this to happen. And we'll move on for some other planks of the action days. Another one was inclusive digital future for all. We might have had a duplication there on that one. At any rate, the one after that is fair, inclusive, and anti-racist economies to leave no one behind, which has sort of a left-wing bent to it in terms of the terminology there. And we'll keep going from there. We'll get into the Global Digital Compact, which is a very important part of this, Brian. It's a comprehensive framework for global governance of digital technology and AI. 20 years after the World Summit on the Information Society, which happened quite some time ago, of course, it charts a roadmap for global digital cooperation to harness the immense potential of digital technology and close digital divides. On September 22nd, the first day of the actual summit itself, after the 2 action days, the world leaders convened in New York for the Summit of the Future, the official summit, where they adopted a pact for the future that includes a global digital compact. The source of that, of course, is the UN itself. And this basically just lays out the very general structure. You have the Pact for the Future, and one of the 2 annexes is the Global Digital Compact, and the other is the Declaration on Future Generations. But what this boils down to, Brian, is that the UN is really involving the youth, as they did in the first 2 days of this overall 4-day soiree, and getting them marinated in UN principles to get them to carry the torch for a digitized future, for the Declaration on Future Generations. And it really boils down to maintaining and sustaining and implementing the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. If you had to boil it down to anything, that's what it's all about. Because without the SDGs, the UN loses a major part of its mission. That's central to the UN mission right now. So back to you, Brian.
Mark, thank you very much for that.